Good evening and welcome to Under the Hood. It is Monday, November 27th. Can you believe it? It is nearly December. I'm Eli Karp, your host of Under the Hood, and today with me we have Happy. If his screen shows up, there he is, Matt and Spentano. So we've got a lot to get into today. We've had a 2-week break. Hope you had a happy Thanksgiving. Again, if you're watching, please submit your questions through the comments box. We are happy to answer them if you have any questions and if we have any viewers, contingent upon a couple of things. So we've got a lot to get into. We've got the NFL to talk about. We've got a lot of college football to talk about, more so than usual, as a week from yesterday, we will know the college football playoff field, the field of four, and that'll be extremely interesting. Some NBA news, we'll get to that later on, but we're going to try to speed things along, and let's open up with the NFL. We are through, what is this, week 11 or week 12? It's week 11.
I think 11, no 12.
12? Well, okay, let's see. The
Because
Giants are
we
2-9 with a bye.
played
Yep, it's week 12. We're through week 12. Tonight, all you have to do is some simple addition with the Giants and then add one, not in a win in the form of a bye, though. So it is week 12. Closes out tonight, Monday Night Football, in about a half hour. Lots of interesting stuff. Had a couple good matchups yesterday. That Rams-Saints matchup seemed to live up to the billing. 7-3 team against an 8-2 team, and they come out of that matchup both 8-3. The Rams scoring a pretty solid victory over the Saints. People wondered how they would respond after really a drubbing and a handling against the Vikings up in Minnesota, and the Rams did respond, and the Vikings took care of business against a pesky Detroit team that had beaten them in their last three. And on Thanksgiving, that is no easy feat. So I would lay it off to you, Spentano. What do you find?
From just the NFC or just the NFL in general?
Week 12.
Well, Dallas now has a 3% chance to make the playoffs. And I saw if they win out and Philadelphia loses out, then they're in. But the season's pretty much over for them. They're not winning 3 in a row without Zeke or without pretty much their entire offensive line. Like, I saw a tweet and at practice, because they play again on Thursday. I think it was practice either Saturday or Sunday. They had Travis Frederick, their starting center, and then they had 4 backups. So they're starting to look like the Giants' offensive line, and that was their calling card last year and pretty much what they hung their hat on. And now it's not good. And then their defense is even worse without Sean Lee. So the chances are slim, and I'd put them at impossible. But we're going to get a good draft pick, so that's to look forward to.
I want to get your thoughts on this question I'm about to ask you, but I will say, at the beginning of the year, I thought the Cowboys would take a little step back. Maybe not this big a step back, where they're sitting at 5-6 and possibly staring down a losing record this season, but 12-4, they have a tougher schedule. They lost a couple pieces from last year. They obviously, loss of Zeke seems to be huge now, but what to you is the driving factor behind Dak Prescott's struggles? Is it that maybe he really can't do it on his own? And when I mean on his own, with average help. Before, he had outstanding help. He had a great running back. He had one of the best offensive lines in the league. That's great help. Now he's dealing with a mediocre offensive line and a mediocre running back. So what do you see as the cause of his struggles? Is it really we can't jump to conclusions too fast? I don't like to do that. But this is now a few straight weeks where we have seen him majorly struggle, and it's not like these defenses have been top tier or elite defenses. So I want to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, I think that he's not a Rodgers or a Brady or a Breeze, someone that can lead their team to above 500 seasons without any help. Those type of quarterbacks are on another level. And then I think it's pretty evident that Wentz last year didn't have really any help, and his best offensive lineman got suspended. And then he was struggling. He was throwing a lot of interceptions. And now Dak, he has no help, and he's struggling. And now Wentz has an amazing running game, amazing offensive line, and amazing defense, so he's succeeding. And these young quarterbacks, they're surrounded a lot by their systems, but he's not a Rodgers or he's not the 14th best player as he was voted last year.
And he's not what he was last year. People were looking at him like, this is truly the face of the franchise. And he still could be a solid quarterback. Again, there's a few bad games. Everybody goes through a few bad games. There's no reason to imply that this is a career-defining stretch in Dak Prescott's second year. But it's just something to keep an eye on, especially as the season finishes. But something else I have to say, what does Jason Garrett actually do? You hear about coaches either calling one side of the plays or really having a hand in anything, but it seems like whenever you watch the Cowboys, whether they have been successful or not, Jason Garrett just sits or stands on the sideline with a headset clapping his hands. He doesn't seem like he calls any of the plays. It seems like he's just there to keep the trains running on time and be a motivator. I'm actually curious as to what he does in Smithtown. I'm not sure if you have an answer or you view it any differently, but as a Cowboys fan, do you really think he coaches?
I can tell you what he doesn't do, make any adjustments at halftime, because pretty much, I mean, in the Philly game, they were up at the half by some miracle. They made no adjustments. The Eagles came out, and they just punked them. And then earlier in the season, I think they were up 15 at the half against the Rams, and they were up even more against the Packers. And the coaching staff doesn't make any adjustments, and then they just crumble in the second half. They just think that they can just run the ball forever and it's going to work, but they don't make adjustments.
Yeah, and
to answer your question, no, I don't know if he actually does anything. And I'll add a point about their first place schedule. The first place teams this year, Atlanta has taken a step, I'd say a minor step back. Like, they're not as dominant as they were, but they're finding their groove again.
I think some of us saw that coming with the absence of Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah. Seattle's defense is just looking like a mess right now because of all the injuries, so they've taken a step back. Green Bay lost Rodgers. Dallas looks bad. And then you have all these matchups from third-place teams last year that are looking really good, like Rams-Saints, Rams-Vikings. And I believe the Saints and Vikings are going to play, or already have played.
But Saints and Vikings played Monday night, week 1.
They did.
Oh, yeah, they did. So the third-place teams were the Saints, Vikings, Rams, and Washington, I think.
Philly.
Yeah, no. Philly was the fourth.
Really?
Yeah, Philly was fourth. And Washington. So, like, 3 of those teams are going to win their division. So, it's just interesting to see how, like, these teams are like, oh, we got a third-place schedule. Which, I mean, that phrase is kind of overused because it really only dictates 2 games. But they played probably the toughest teams.
Yes, but this is why you see more worst to first and improvements throughout, with minor roster adjustments and slight coaching changes. Things like this can happen, and that's why we've seen a lot of it happen. Now, Matt, I want to get your thoughts. It seems like a very competitive NFC. You got a lot of solid teams. I think you have 7 teams that are 7-4 or better, and in the AFC, I believe you only have 3 of those teams. You have the 2 9-2 teams, Patriots and Steelers. Pretty much most people saw those teams coming as really contenders. Jacksonville, probably the most the most unproven or most skeptical 7-4.
Mhm.
And then after that, the Chiefs might be leading the AFC West at 6-5, but frankly, they're terrible. Like, seriously, Alex Smith has formed back to Alex Smith. Andy Reid has not made the adjustments to keep this team winning. The defense isn't all that great. And right now the team playing the best, but the team that can never get out of its own way, and I'll be surprised if it actually manages to, I was about to say the San Diego Chargers, but maybe that they moved, the Los Angeles Chargers will be able to get out of their own way. They started the season 0-4, and they are now 5-2 in their last 7, and they're always in games. The Chargers never get blown out. They just lose in agony and really a heartbreaking fashion.
That
So
game
we'll see
Jacksonville.
if Philip Rivers can lead his troops to victory, because the Broncos, they stink. Oakland's, they're hanging around at, what are they, 5-6 or probably 5-6.
5-6.
So both of them are at 5-6. The Chargers and the Raiders. Chargers have won the first matchup between the two. The Chiefs are really, really sliding. I would be surprised if they're able to recover. I think the Chargers are the best bet at this moment because the Raiders have just been too inconsistent. But we'll see if, as healthy and with a new defensive coordinator, if Oakland can string some stuff together and manage to fight their way into the playoffs. Frankly, everyone 5-6 right now has a shot at being in the AFC playoffs, which is a shame. Really, it shows how really just how lackluster that conference is this year. So, Matt, I want to get your take on a couple teams that we got to keep an eye out for that haven't necessarily been mentioned or talked about in depth yet.
I mean, yeah, I think that the AFC, what is it, the West? The AFC West is it, right?
Yeah.
It's going to come down to the last week of the season when Raiders and Chargers play. I mean, I really think the Chiefs are out of it now. I mean, they're just sliding. Like, there's no coming back. It's really going to come down. That division's going to come down to the Chiefs. I mean, not the Chiefs, the Chargers and Raiders in the last week. But it really is not going to matter because it's going to end up being, as it always is, either Brady, Roethlisberger, or, well, it can't be anymore, but it's always been Brady, Roethlisberger, or Manning coming out of the AFC. And it's once again going to be either Brady or Roethlisberger. I mean, it's just the AFC's problem. I mean, it's just really kind of boring, honestly. Like, I mean, it's pretty much set and done.
Never forget elite Joe Flacco.
Oh yeah, true. That one year.
They are right there in it. And you, as a Giants fan, I don't despise the Jets like some Jet fans hate the Giants, but I genuinely feel bad for these Jets who had historically low expectations coming into the season. They managed to get it to 4-5. They could have possibly had a winning record, and they have two very tough losses. They played a beatable Tampa team and a solid, but I'm not yet sold on this Carolina team. They've had chances. This Jets team, and this was a really disastrous loss because this was a season fighting game, and they had a lead. And Josh McCown made a couple boneheaded plays that this is what we expected to see from the Jets this season. But they kept their fans in it. You know, they're 4-7. They could theoretically be 6-5 at the moment. I don't think anyone could contest that would be practical. But I hate to see it from the Jets, who have come oh so close, and now they're jetting after they've given their fans a bit of hope. They've drawn them in, and just to, kick them right back out. So it's a little sad to see that. Happy, I want to get your take on last night's game, which once Aaron Rodgers went out, people wrote off the great matchup, but I don't think Aaron Rodgers could have made the matchup any more exciting.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It was as exciting as you wanted a Sunday night game to be. There's been some duds in recent weeks and recent months, really. But, I mean, Brent Hundley is not that bad of a quarterback when it comes down to it. He's average. I mean, he's not great, but he's average. And the thing is, when you replace such a great quarterback in Aaron Rodgers, it makes him seem terrible in comparison. But, yes, I think this week was his coming out party, even with the loss. He had his best game, and really, I mean, it's not a great game. Antonio Brown is still Antonio Brown. Steelers, an ugly 9-2, but the Steelers are the only team in the AFC outside the New England Patriots that have a chance, really. I mean, you look at the rest of you've already spoken about that West. You've spoken a little bit about the Jaguars. There's not really any team that could really compete with the Patriots besides these Steelers.
Yeah, it'll come down to the last couple weeks of the season, who ends up with home field. That could determine it. But going back to the Chargers, they did give the Patriots all they could handle in Foxborough a couple of weeks ago. But also, speaking about Green Bay, I'm not quite in accord with you agreeing that Brett Hundley isn't that bad, because this week was his first week where he looked like a suitable NFL quarterback. He looked god-awful the last 6 weeks before that. But what I must say, and what I agree watching the game, listening to Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth last night, was that it looked like he had gotten some coaching from Aaron Rodgers Only before this week,
Yes.
he actually looked like Aaron Rodgers, who just wasn't Aaron Rodgers. The way he was throwing the ball, the way he got it out, he was throwing with his feet off of the ground, which I find very interesting. It just looked like he was an Aaron Rodgers disciple running the system, as opposed to the previous 6 weeks where he just looked like an out of place, almost like a rookie. But yesterday, for some reason, just the poise with which he threw the ball, the poise with which he operated, even the cleanliness of the balls he threw, he looked so much reminiscent of Aaron Rodgers that it was almost startling to me. And I'm a little bit interested to watch to see what he does going forward, because he had been so underwhelming in the previous part of his campaign.
Sometimes people just play better on primetime.
That's
well, yeah, considering he got shut out 23-0 against the Baltimore Ravens either a week or two ago. I think it was last week.
It was
at
last
1
week.
o'clock at home.
Another thing, though, is he has not had even last night. He hasn't had a running back to help alleviate him of like the burden of really being able to run an offense, because the Packers have not had a stable running back all season. I mean, Ty Montgomery showed something the first 2 weeks before getting injured, and then getting injured again and again. And then the other two, they just not have been able to give him a stable rushing attack yet, which played a huge part into Hundley struggling.
Yeah, and to be fair, the Packers haven't really had a running back for the last 5 years or maybe 10 years. But what was most impressive about Hundley's performance is that, one, it was on the road, and two, the Pittsburgh Steelers have a pretty good defense. After a couple mediocre down years, they are back to having a good defense, and the way that Hundley was really able to, in crunch time and just throughout the game, make throws, put up 28 points, and it's not like any of those came from defensive scores. That was impressive coming from Brett Hundley. One final point on the NFL I want to make before we move on, because we are really diving in deep here. After watching the Giants game on Thursday night, I am convinced, and seeing the post-game reaction, I am convinced that Eli Manning should retire after the season. And I don't make this statement lightly, because I've always given Eli the benefit of the doubt. But after his 100th loss, and granted, he has one more than he has lost, he has 2 Super Bowls, he looked, he sounded, he felt defeated. And once you're 36 years old on a 2-9 team with absolutely no help, and let's be honest, he might not have much help, but he still has to play better. The way he played, a true champion lifts the players up around him and makes him better. And he is not able to do that. And that is an issue. And with McAdoo, he should, frankly, by the way Eli has looked, and the way that he doesn't look like he has much more left in him, and the season McAdoo has had, they both go, in my mind, they only go out together, because that's the only reason the Giants kept McAdoo, was so that Eli didn't have to relearn a new system at age 35. But I think the best case scenario for Giants fans is to have both of those guys out at the end of the year, because they're only going out together. One really isn't leaving without the other. I don't see it happening that way. This could be the end of the line for one of my favorite players of all time, and the only Giant quarterback that I've ever known or have ever paid attention to.
Yeah.
Happy, you have any other thoughts on that?
I haven't even thought about the thought of Eli retiring, because it's just not been a thought in my mind of Eli Manning sitting out a game. That's just how, I don't want to say consistent, but the word, I guess, would be consistent in just the terms of him starting games. He has not sat out a game in over a decade. So I think he's over 200 at this point now. And I mean, you make great points. That was definitely the worst game I've seen of Eli this season, probably in a long time. And I can definitely see, if Eli Manning were to hang it up after this year, I wouldn't be surprised. But it's weird. I haven't even thought about it. It's just tough. Yeah. It's a tough decision for Eli and the Giants.
You mentioned he hasn't sat out in over a decade. He has never missed a start in his career, and he has to be praised for his durability. But seriously, you're playing a Washington defense that's not special, and you have 77 yards before a garbage time drive when maybe you eclipse 100.
Yes.
I have my uncle on the couch sitting next to me, who typically gives the benefit of the doubt to a team. But he was like, wow, I did not realize the Giants were this bad. And that is so true. They're just disgusting to watch. And the fact that the Chiefs lost to them the week before only shows how poor the Chiefs have played lately. So that is my last thought on the NFL. We're going to move on to college because we really got to get into this here. Again, if you're watching, please submit your questions. We'll be happy to answer them and address them. I will give you my 4 right now, and then I'll give you my 4 right now. We'll go down the line, talk about it, and then we will give our projected playoff fields after championship weekend when the field is released by the committee next Sunday. 1, Clemson. 2, Oklahoma. 3, Wisconsin. 4, Auburn. It's a 2-loss team, but come at me. I think they're better than any of the teams below them. But obviously, wins can knock teams out. You can see you have Alabama at 5. Nothing is in their hands right now. Maybe if we'll get into this a little bit more. I will hold off on that, and we'll go down the line. So, Sventano, your 4.
My 4 right now, I got to go with Clemson, Oklahoma, Auburn, and Wisconsin because, I mean, like you said, for Alabama, they really – or no, were you talking about Bama?
Briefly, but I was going to get back into them because they weren't included in my 4.
They don't really control their fate, but the 4 I do have making it based off the results I picked for the Power Fives is Clemson, Auburn, Alabama, and Ohio State.
You think those will be the 4 in?
Well, if Clemson beats Miami, which that's my projection, Auburn beats Georgia. And then I think that TCU is going to upset Oklahoma. And then I think that Ohio State's going to beat Wisconsin. And in that case, it's really up to that kind of just hands it to Alabama. Unless you would take TCU over Alabama, but
it's tough, but
no.
I'll get to it in a minute. Matt, your 4.
All right, so I got my 4 right now are 1 Oklahoma, 2 Wisconsin, 3 Clemson, and 4 Auburn. Just because, I mean, I think the order is really kind of weird how they're doing it right now because they're just totally abandoning everything they've done in the past. I have Oklahoma at 1 because they have by far the best resume. That loss to Iowa State, it's not a terrible loss. Iowa State's a solid team, even though they're 7, 8 wins. But I mean, they're a solid team. I have Wisconsin at 2 because, I just don't get how. Obviously, Wisconsin's probably going to be in the top 4 this week, but how are they still in the number 5? They're the only undefeated Power 5. It just does not make sense to me. And then I have Clemson 3 because I just can't get over that loss to Syracuse. Syracuse is 4 and, well, I don't know if they won this past week, but they were 4-7 going into this past week. And that's just I know they had their backup quarterback in for most of the second half, but they were getting beat pretty bad when their starter was in. And then I have Auburn behind Clemson just because of the head-to-head matchup. So, I just think that's the way the committee's done it in the past. So that's the way they should do it now, but they're really going off their precedents.
Yeah, and just to put what I can only parallel the Wisconsin situation to is I want to say it was Florida State in the first year of the playoff. They played no one out of conference. They were undefeated, but they were not beating teams handily. That it was the question of, well, if they were to lose one, they couldn't possibly be in because they have not looked dominant and they have played no one. And that's a similar, situation what Wisconsin has found itself in. But the tests they have been given, they have passed with, in my opinion, flying colors. You can say whatever you want about the schedule, but the games they've played, you've had Iowa. Iowa beat Ohio State by 31 points the week before Wisconsin played them. Wisconsin held them to 66 yards and no offensive touchdowns. Wisconsin then plays Michigan. Michigan's not a great team, but they are a solid team. They were ranked at the time. They handled them, 24-10, something like that. Wisconsin never wins pretty. And that's what people have to realize who don't either like who are not Big Ten aficionados, who just don't give Wisconsin the credit they deserve. This is a program that has never won in Big 12 numbers or even Ohio State numbers. This is a team that grinds it out, and they play NFL-style football in the college game. And so for people to say, well, they didn't win by this much of a margin or they haven't played such a tough schedule, they're just going to go about their business and play as they do every single week. Now, will they beat Ohio State this weekend? I have no idea because we don't know what Ohio State team is showing up, and I have no idea how Alex Hornibrook is going to play because he is their driving factor. The defense can only hold Ohio State off so long if Alex Hornibrook doesn't stay on the field. So that'll be interesting. But before we go any further into this, Happy, you're 4.
I have Clemson at 1. I feel like outside their loss to Syracuse, which you said, the backup quarterback did play half the game. I feel like they've been the most consistent team based on wins and resume. And I'm just not a fan of the Big 12. And I cannot put a Big 12 team first. It's just no defense. Not a true merit of, I feel like, the top 4 teams are. I have Oklahoma second. I mean, because their only losses to Ohio State. Wait, no. Their only losses to Iowa State, my bad. And move third, I have Wisconsin because they're undefeated, Power 5. Every reason you said before. In number 4, I have Auburn. 2 losses. I mean, they're 2 losses. Of course, one to Clemson, one to LSU. But again, they beat Alabama. They beat Georgia, both ranked number 1 at the time. And just outside, I have Alabama, and Tier said that they don't control their own fate, and that might hurt them in the end. But I don't see TCU beating Oklahoma in the Big 12 because the last time they played, TCU just was abysmal, and they just could not get anything going, and I don't see them having really any chance against Oklahoma. And I really think Alabama's only chance to get in is if Ohio State beats Wisconsin. Then I think Alabama could squeeze into that 4th spot.
Yeah. All right, so let's go into some brief scenarios here. Right now I have Clemson, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Auburn. If things start to get – the ACC is easy. The winner of that game is in. As much as you want to say Miami might not be a great team or that you have some reserves about them, they will be a one-loss conference champion with enough good wins, and one loss on the road isn't going to kill them. The winner of that game is in. Yeah. Everything else is pretty much up for grabs. If Georgia wins the SEC championship, they're in. They're a one-loss SEC champion. That's as good as an undefeated SEC champion when it comes to getting in, seeding, whatever. I think teams will be happy just that they're in. However, if they don't win, we could be looking at a very interesting scenario. In my opinion, if Auburn wins, I would put them in. Now, we've never seen a 2-loss champion, and 2 losses seems to be the kiss of death for nearly every team. And this is the 4th year, but people are now looking at these 2-loss teams like maybe with a little more hope because of some of the weak schedules or weak performances by 1-loss teams or non-conference champions. But Auburn, you mentioned Oklahoma, Matt, has one of the best resumes. Auburn has one of the best resumes in the country. And their 2 losses are pretty good. They lost to, right now, my number 1 Clemson on the road by a 1 possession. They led a game at LSU that they just blew on the road. Again, and they were also the hottest team in the country with some of the greatest wins. They've now upset number 1, national number 1s in 2 of the last 3 weeks. This is, the committee factors in a hot streak, or really how the team is playing right now. They don't care about September. They really don't, unless that was like a resume building or really a killing game. They don't put that much stock into that. They put stock into how you're playing now. And if they beat Georgia, I would put them in, and you can buck the trend for all future years of a 2-loss team not making it. I'm hoping Wisconsin wins. I like to see them play well. I like to see Wisconsin win. They never seem to be able to beat Ohio State. And Wisconsin, after coming close, they would have, if they had won the Big Ten championship, there would have been a case for them to make the the college football playoff last year. In any case, they're set up well to make it this year. I don't know if they're going to be able to pull it out. If they don't, I still don't put Ohio State in because I couldn't. Now, who else you would put in? I'm not sure. If you already have Auburn in. I mean, Auburn would be a 3-loss team, so no, you're not putting a 3-loss team in. If Georgia were to win that, and then Ohio State, would you then put a 1-loss but really untested Alabama team in over a 2-loss champion Ohio State?
You see that?
Interesting conversation. I don't see the loser of the ACC championship game getting in that. Then you look at a TCU, but a TCU would have to win their conference to get in, which would mean Oklahoma would then have 2 losses in a non-conference championship. It all kind of gets jumbled from there. I think Oklahoma will roll. I think Clemson will roll. The questions for me come in the Big Ten and the SEC championship games. Is anyone thinking really boldly? Because I was really annoyed, at least, with what some of the people yesterday were saying on ESPN, where you have all the SEC juggernauts going around talking about, oh yeah, it should be Clemson, Oklahoma, Auburn, and Alabama. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. This Alabama team has shown me nothing this season besides that they can play well against a cupcake schedule, and they are just a good Nick Saban team. But other than that, they have shown me nothing to believe that they are exceptional.
Well, what about Wisconsin then? If you're going to say that about Alabama.
Yeah.
Well, because Wisconsin, I believe, has actually played a slight. They haven't lost. You have to respect.
Yeah, but they haven't played in Auburn.
Fair enough, but they're still undefeated. And the Big Ten championship, that's their Auburn. That is their Auburn. They're either in or they're out. This is the thing. Wisconsin is not making it if they lose this game. Even if other teams lose their championship games that would open a door for them to get in, they're not getting in. They're undefeated. They're in. That speaks for itself. Going undefeated in a Power 5 conference, it's a hard thing to do.
Well, no, yeah, I'm saying that. I'm just saying, like...
Also,
yeah.
I guess also, like, what really bothers me about the SEC is that Alabama played Mercer before the Auburn game. Like, that's really just, like, ridiculous. Like, I didn't even know Mercer had a football team before that game.
They beat Duke in March Madness, like...
I mean...
I remember that.
I mean, like, the problem is, like, the SEC is just way overrated right now. It's really ridiculous. Like, the Alabama, Auburn, and Georgia are, like, they're pretty good teams, but the rest of the SEC is just, like, it's pretty awful. Like,
bad.
I mean, it's bad. I mean, if you think...
Tennessee.
I mean, if you think Alabama's, like,
Arkansas.
struggling against Ole Miss and, like, I mean, Mississippi State is not a very good team, and like I get that's a hard place to play, but they're not very good. And it's just I really think Wisconsin has had a tougher schedule than Alabama in the end.
Yeah, and I want to make the point about the cupcakes. I believe that Auburn, Alabama, and Clemson all played cupcakes the week before rivalry week, which to me is unacceptable. Play cupcakes in September, maybe October. Unacceptable to be the second to last week of the regular season. That's to me unacceptable. But your point about the SEC, look how many coaching vacancies there are. That goes to show what a state of turmoil this is in. And Happy, you mentioned Tennessee before. We'll get your 4 picks, and then we will just talk a little bit about what transpired with Tennessee and their hire but not hire of Greg Schiano, and just really the terrible debacle that went on, and just something that might reflect something greater going on in the world about the message of mass media. But in any case, Happy, you're 4.
4 for the playoff?
Yeah.
Okay.
Who will it be next Sunday?
Yeah. I think you have Clemson at 1. They beat Miami in a close game because I think Miami will get to Kelly Bryant, that fast defense. But I just think Clemson is just too much firepower in offense, and they'll overcome that fast Canes defense. At 2, I have Oklahoma. They beat TCU very easily, and they will play Wisconsin. I really do think Wisconsin will beat this Ohio State team. I just think there's too many question marks with Ohio State, and I think Wisconsin has been really firing on all cylinders recently. And finally, at 4, I mean, I don't want to put Alabama here. Who am I missing? I feel like I'm missing someone. Oh no,
Auburn?
I'm putting Auburn. Yeah, Auburn. Auburn's
Georgia?
at 4. No, I have Auburn winning. I think Auburn showed that they could beat Georgia pretty handily, and I think even in a different environment, I think they could get the job done.
Yeah, that's one of the things about Auburn's success. It has come at home in this SEC championship game, a neutral site, but really it's in Atlanta. This is Georgia territory. Something interesting to watch. Before we move on to our final topic tonight, I do want to mention this Tennessee thing where it seemed like the deal to hire Greg Schiano had been all but done, but then there are some ties between Schiano and the Jerry Sandusky sex abuse scandal at Penn State. Now, everyone who has looked in to these ties have said he is clear of them. He had nothing to do with it, and he had no connection to it. And now everyone who's been involved in the situation is speaking out against the decision at unhiring them and unhiring Schiano because of this. But really, it had just spread around Twitter as some people tossed it around so lightly, and then now you see protests all over campus, and that causes the unhiring of a guy who, if really innocent, just lost out on a huge job. Now, to begin with, I didn't think it was a good hire. Nevertheless, you got to block that out of the way for what happened. If Tennessee had truly vetted him, they have more information than any of these, students on the lawn on one of the Tennessee quads. They have infinitely more information than they do. They went through a true vetting process. Why now? Is it like just an excuse to get out of what might have been an impulse bad hire? I really don't get it. It's a poor look for Tennessee, and it's a bad message that people can just hook on to really untruthful things and, dare I call it, fake news about costing somebody his job. Spentano.
I mean, I don't know the situation, but what from I saw is an outcry of people saying Greg Schiano's bad, and then Greg Schiano gets not fired but not hired, and then I saw a reverse outcry of people saying the people who said Greg Schiano's bad are bad and terrible people, and it's crazy how social media can control a situation. But I haven't researched that much into the situation to where I can just say an informed opinion. So that's just what I saw.
Yeah, it's a constantly developing situation. I'll speak on one other coaching vacancy filled. I thought Florida did a good job with Dan Mullen. Just snatching him away from Mississippi State, where he seemed to be plenty comfortable, and he's a good foundation there with Nick Fitzgerald at quarterback. They had a solid season, but again, more still to be desired. But it's Mississippi State. It's not Alabama or Auburn or really Florida like that. But there's one vacancy filled, so many left to fill in big Power 5 desirable jobs that if you can build up a program in a couple of years, which is more possible now than it ever was before, could be in for some nice success. Matt, your thoughts on this Tennessee debacle?
I mean, it's basically what it was is the fans are using the Penn State thing as an excuse to say that they don't want Greg Schiano. They think that Tennessee is too good of a program to hire some defensive coordinator that not a lot of people have heard of before basically Tennessee started talking with him. I think a good fit for Tennessee could be Kevin Sumlin, who is but he has been fired by Texas A&M, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not to mention that was a terrible fire by Texas A&M, but I mean,
but didn't you see it coming? For all the success regular season, they have never been able to win the big games.
Yeah, it was definitely.
People saw that coming since that first week loss to UCLA.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that was definitely coming. But I mean, I think Kevin Sumlin's an outstanding coach.
I think. Yeah.
I mean, he should be somewhere. He can't be not coaching. He's a great coach, but I think Texas. The problem is most of these programs are reaching too high, especially in the SEC. They think they should be winning and competing for national championships every single year. But a Texas A&M doesn't realize that 8 or 9 wins a year is going to work for them. If they just get 8 or 9 wins every year, every now and then they'll have that amazing year. Like say they have Johnny Manziel or something. They'll every now and then. I mean, these fans are just too power hungry. It's really an issue.
Well, yeah, when they see Alabama pulls off at least 11 wins every year, and they're the gold standard of SEC and college football, there is something left to be desired for their programs, even though unless you have a Nick Saban or just an incredible season, it's not going to happen. But one thing about Kevin Sumlin is he should stay in the South. He's such a good recruiter. He might not be able to win the big games. He is such a good recruiter and program builder that he should stay in the South. I believe he will find a home somewhere else in the SEC. Another name to keep an eye on, Jimbo Fisher. This is a historically bad year for him at Florida State. Will he move? There are many desirable jobs that would like to probably hire him at schools that would like to hire him. So just a name to keep an eye on. Scott F. Well, who has gone undefeated so far, though they're not in the Power 5, he will get consideration, as well as from Nebraska, his alma mater, which is an absolute shambles. My goodness, Nebraska is awful. But any final points about college football? Is that you happy?
Oh, yeah. I just want to make one quick point about Greg Schiano. I think a lot of people of Greg Schiano was when he was in the NFL coaching the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And they weren't amazing, but he turned in from a promising team to pretty mediocre within his 2-year tenure. I mean, he was 11-21, so he had a pretty abysmal NFL coaching career. He goes back to Ohio State, to be their defensive coordinator. But before his NFL coaching career, he was a very successful coach at Rutgers. I mean, they had a bunch of winning seasons. They got into some, good bowl games for Rutgers standards. But, I think, forget who said it, but the Penn State scandal as the scapegoat to be the reason why not to hire him, because they just didn't really want him as a coach. It's just the power of social media.
Yeah, it looks awful on the Tennessee athletic department, and really, they should have done they never should have at least hired him in the first place, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But they can't use this excuse, them and their fans. It's completely, there's no integrity in it at all. It's really just trying to back out of a bad deal made in the first place. And this it shows how bad this Tennessee program is. After a couple of years ago, everyone thought Tennessee was going to be hot stuff down there in the SEC East. But even with a weak SEC East in the last couple of years, they have not been able to do anything. So that concludes our college football for the night, and we got to wrap things up. But before we go, we're going to talk just a tiny bit about the NBA and some news today. David Fizdale, ex-head coach of the Memphis Grizzlies, was fired. There's a big losing streak for the Grizzlies down there. Marc Gasol unhappy, probably why he's out. But he had really nice success in his in early on in his Memphis tenure. He's, regardless, one of the brightest young minds in the game. He will likely be a hot commodity elsewhere in the league. Spentano, you are a Grizzlies fan. Let's hear it from you.
I don't think it had anything to do with his system. I'm pretty sure Marc Gasol just went up to them and said, it's me or Fizdale. And then the front office decided that a 32-year-old big man with foot problems that doesn't try half the time was more important than a young coach trying to establish a culture and get a system in place. I mean, you hand a person a roster, and a year and 20 games is not nearly enough time to have them create what they want. And granted, that roster doesn't even have that much talent to begin with. You have Marc Gasol and Mike Conley, and those are your two big ones. And then if you look at the rest of that roster, there's almost nothing there. The losing streak is because they didn't have Mike Conley. And they are a very poor team without Conley. But with Conley and Gasol, they're a slightly above average team. And they were trying to maintain that because the fans in Memphis, that's kind of what they live for, and they're with their fan base. But the management, I get why they're trying to hold on to Conley and Gasol for this long, because they have proven time and again they cannot draft. The last time a first-round draft pick succeeded for the Memphis Grizzlies was 2007 when they drafted Mike Conley. They drafted Hasheem Thabeet over James Harden. Hasheem Thabeet averaged 2 points and was out after. They drafted Kevin Love. Good job. Then they traded him for OJ Mayo, who was gone after. Who's now actually currently banned from the NBA for substance abuse. And they drafted Jordan Adams over Rodney Hood. I think Jordan Adams may have played 20 games at most. Rodney Hood's currently flourishing in Utah. Like, even a 14-year-old me would have known to pick Rodney Hood over Jordan Adams. It was so obvious. And they even play the same position. And they need wing help. And then they just take a terrible player. Their first-round pick last year is already off the team. Like, he got cut after 1 year. That's how bad he was. And then they traded a first-round pick to the Celtics for the first pick of the second round that year for Deonta Davis, who is currently on the team. And they basically spent 2 firsts on a guy that they could have got with the first pick. Or not the first, with their first-round pick. But they chose to pick a point guard who can't shoot or pass or really defend over this prospect big man. And then they overpay to get the big man in the next round. And that Clippers pick is looking really, really good now because the Clippers suck. So that pick's going to be good later. And then the ineptitude is amazing. And I've kind of gone off on a tangent not talking about David Fizdale, but it's not Fizdale. It's the front office and Chris Wallace. And Robert Parra is the owner, and for some reason he is in love with Chris Wallace and will never get rid of him. And it's a cycle.
All right. Well, there we have it. I actually liked what I saw from David Fizdale in the playoffs last year, watching some of the Grizzlies games. He'll be picked up, or whether he's an assistant coach soon, he'll be a head coach soon with everything that happens in an NBA season.
People are thinking him to Cleveland.
Yeah. Without further ado, that will will finish us for tonight. We've had quite a lively atmosphere on tonight, and we hope you will join us next week, because we've got a lot to get to next week. We will be discussing all things college football playoff, as we will have the field and everything else that keeps on going. So thank you for watching. We appreciate it, and we will see you next week.